Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Marie Kato. Europe is escalating its battle with big tech, accusing platforms like TikTok of breaching child safety rules, while France becomes the first EU nation to ban social media for under 15s. But as regulators crack down, critical questions emerge. Is Europe genuinely safeguarding minors or replacing online risks with invasive age verification and mass digital surveillance? To tell us more about the newest updates and challenging questions, I'm joined by Filip Konopczyński, AI and digital technology regulation expert at the Polish Ministry of Digital Affairs. Hello and welcome.
Hello, nice. Thank you for having me.
So, let's begin with some basic questions. What exactly does the EU Commission believe that TikTok is doing wrong?
Well, so far all we know is the preliminary findings that the Commission has sent and shared with us, sent directly to TikTok, and it's a result of over 2 years of investigation started back in 2024. And there are various areas of interesting details that Commission has decided to push. So firstly, there's the whole question of systemic risks and how platforms, very large online platforms such as TikTok, should be mitigating them. It's all assumed under the auspices of the Digital Services Act, which is a piece of regulation passed in 2022, but already enforceable. Under the light of recent developments coming from mainly Australia, but also quite recently France, the Commission has decided that it's about time to do something about the way that minors, teenagers, often kids that are very young, I mean 5, 6, 7 years old, are using such platforms. And we can divide this discussion into various topics, but the ones that are most pressing, I would say, is the question of the addictive characteristics of such platforms, and it's a question of endless scrolling. So when you take into consideration the fact that the very same application, TikTok, called Douyin in China, is very differently both regulated and it provides a different user experience. There is no way of a Chinese kid doing the endless scrolling, whereas in Europe and other parts of the world, it's perfectly feasible, and in fact we know, and the reports published regularly by NASC prove that over 6 hours are being spent every day by teenagers, very often during the late hours. So TikTok is one of the main contributors. So that would be one aspect of things. The other one related directly to child safety. So what Commission found questionable is the fact that when you're a minor, there are no special provisions that disallow potential perpetrators of acts of violence or even sexual violence to contact those kids directly. Then there is a question of recommendation algorithms. So if you're a TikTok user, even if you're not following kids, you might be presented with content made by kids, and we all know that there are child predators out there. So these I would say are the main lines of attack.
Of course. Now, I just wanted to ask whether, as much as the EU Commission believes that TikTok might be on the wrong side of digital technology, do you think that perhaps social media for children should be treated as an unsafe product that perhaps should be redesigned, or perhaps like alcohol and tobacco, children should simply be excluded from social media platforms?
Well, we should be careful with analogies. I know it may come helpful, but in fact we have to walk a very thin line between the potential harms and threats that come from these platforms, as well as the positive side of things, meaning that we are being all associated, socialized into this new digital environment. But when we want to be honest and serious about these things, just take the example of this very same algorithm, as I mentioned before, not being treated the same in China. So if we assume that Chinese provider of such services has different rules for their own kids, so to say. And for the children abroad, we do see that something is not right here. And hopefully the result of this investigation will be a set of technical changes that will decrease, for instance, the addictiveness level of such platform, as well as more serious threats to child safety. When it comes to the social media age, we know a lot about the discussion. There's also a piece of legislation being presented at the Polish Parliament as we speak. It's still before it being finally passed, and there are serious questions. Quite recently, also, the use of smartphones in schools was banned in Poland. But these are all intermediary measures, I would say. They're definitely not solving the problem. From the NASC research that we executed, actually the time that kids spend in school is the part of the day where they use social media and smartphones the least. It's usually back at home, often during late hours. When it comes to the age of consent for kids to use social media, we're living in a, I would say, regulatory gray zone. Technically and legally speaking, any minors under 13 should not be able to use such platforms due to the fact that you cannot be a customer if you're under 13 under Polish law. So setting the bar higher at 15 possibly would be a good step, and it would protect a lot of minors from harm. But we should be starting with enforcing the law that already is, not only in the books but also in many areas enforced in action. When it comes to final decisions of the Commission, we're still waiting for the decision. So. Everything is on the table at this point. We could be expecting a fine. That would be probably the strongest and the most direct form of mitigating the actions taken by the platform. But when we take into consideration, for instance, the amounts of financial measures that are being distributed by the Commission, just a couple of days ago, under a different EU regulation, the Digital Markets Act, Google, so Alphabet, was fined with close to 1 billion euros. The only problem being that just last year, 2025, Google made over 114 billion euros. So for many companies, for many large companies, multinational corporations, it's just the cost of doing business. And that should change. The findings issued by the Commission might be a move in that direction. It's not necessarily about fining the company, but it's about changing the ways it's doing its business here in Europe.
Well, TikTok obviously is going to defend itself against these accusations. It actually says that it already has implemented extensive safeguards for teenagers. Why does the Commission consider them to be insufficient?
Well, because we all know what's going on in our kids' smartphones. There are multiple studies carried out all around Europe proving that something is changing, and very often in an extreme rapid pace. So, for instance, another study that we did at NASC proved that over just 2-year period, Wikipedia was replaced by LLM, so chatbots, as the main source of knowledge. And this is something that usually takes a generation or two to switch from, the old school encyclopedias to Wikipedia. It took even longer when we were inventing the printing press. Right now, it's happening very often in a couple of months. So these decisions do matter. And the simplest answer to your question is the fact that kids are massively on TikTok. It's a pressing issue, and the very composition, the very characteristic of DSA as a piece of regulation puts focus on this risk tier approach. So when there is a systemic risk, the measures of mitigating them should be taken instantly and honestly, and that's what we all expect from companies such as TikTok.
Now, I just wanted to ask, we have platforms that verify the age without forcing every single European user to surrender. sensitive personal information. How can these platforms verify that age?
Well, that's a $1 trillion question.
Exactly.
There are multiple ways of doing it technically. So it is feasible to verify someone's age, for instance, using bank information. So most of us uses financial apps on regular basis. They're highly regulated. For instance, Poland has a quite interoperable way of logging into your digital wallet. So proving your identity wouldn't be that hard. But the European Union very often wants to remain technologically neutral. So the law leaves some space for some carve-outs for different approach, but I would expect the market to follow the suit of countries such as Poland or Estonia, where digital ID wallets are quite prevalent and everybody uses them.
Are we not creating a larger problem here?
Well, it depends on who you ask. It's very much a matter of how you phrase this question. When we want to talk about child safety and the fact that there are predators out there lurking in the dark, so to speak, preying on children, it would be more convincing than if we start the conversation by saying, oh, everybody wants to and needs to verify their age. And it's up to the politicians and European officials to frame this conversation right. But it is quite possible that in order to stop certain types of harm being done online to kids, all of us will need to at least once in our lifetime verify our age. And this is a crucial point because we also do not, particularly as someone that comes from Poland, a country that has a very, let's say, we've learned hard lessons when it comes to censorship and government surveillance. It needs to be said that our privacy needs to be protected at any cost. Therefore, all the measures of anonymization, pseudo-anonymization, tokenization of such verification tools need to be in place, because without that, we don't want the government to have a database on what are we doing online.
Are we not sacrificing our privacy by giving up these age verification systems? And really, what we need to look into is perhaps more parental involvement for the sake of our...
Obviously, but we, as I mentioned before, it's a civilizational change. We, as parents, have not been taught how to curate children through the meanders.
Isn't that the greater challenge?
Well, it's very hard to force adults to learn something new. There is no school for parenting that's mandatory everywhere in Europe. So we need to do both, basically. So we need to educate parents, we need to prepare schools, as well as making those companies act in a responsible way. We wouldn't be having this conversation if we were talking about cars. Had there been a car that gets your kid addicted to driving or distributes any kind of pollutant substances while they're in it, we wouldn't be meeting here and discussing this as an issue. Just because digital technologies are new, it does not mean that they do not have to follow the law as well as meet our standards and child protection standards. That's a low-hanging fruit. The true discussions will start when we go further and ask ourselves whether such addictive platforms should be acting the way they are, should be promoting conspiracy theories or other types of disinformation on a day-to-day basis, and distribute them among adults. That's, I would say, that's a more philosophically, legally, and politically loaded discussion. When we're talking about kids, I think most of us, or all of us, agree that we need to take some strong measures, some strong steps, and the Commission is at least manifesting its willingness to do so. But it also needs to be said that it takes a lot of time. So 2 years, 2 years of investigation resulting in preliminary findings, that's not very satisfactory to a lot of watchdogs, a lot of regulatory agencies. So So again, Commission is in a hard place because it has to both work with those companies, multinational companies, as well as try to tame them and make them compatible with our values and with our legal systems.
Absolutely, a multifaceted and very complex issue. Filip Konopczyński, AI and digital technology regulation expert at the Ministry of Digital Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for World Talk. Thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned for much more on TVP World. Goodbye.